Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is April 9, 2023. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Well, whoop-de-doo. It's part two with Andy Hollinden. Andy, I am really honored and pleasure you would actually do a part two because part one went over 2 hours.
Thank you for having me back.
And we only got through not even a third of the questions. So
I fear people will be going, oh no, this guy must be a blowhard.
no, I was trying to review ours and I'm the blowhard. I yap on way too much, but I think you bring out the best in me, Andy. At least as a thinking human being, I'm appreciative of your being so into music that you made it an academic profession. Like the documentary of you online is just an amazing piece. If people don't, they got to watch that. That is an amazing piece. What's the name of it? Will Profess
for Food.
Will Profess for Food. It should say Will Profess Music for Food, but let's dive right into music. Now, on your website, it actually articulates your sort of path, which is how I usually ask people, is what attracted you to pursuing music as a career and a calling? And you already articulated it on your website, so people can read that. But I will flush it out with this. When was the tipping point? Because your dad's your dad has this organ in your house, and he's actually showing you chords.
Yes.
So you're learning the structure of music, something about technique and theory there. You're sort of, what a great way to do that. And by the way, before I forget, we ended the part one with me going on and on about Corla Pandit, who is the Hammond organ player who Frank was obsessed with. And I made a big boo-boo. I said Alan Landsberg started KTLA TV in LA and hired Corla Pandit. But that was wrong. It was Klaus Landsberg. I always get that name wrong. So, I said, a former Hitler employee. So, if Alan Landsberg's still living, this guy's for real. He might be, So I have to do that disclaimer. Bad mistake.
Yes.
It's Klaus.
Yeah.
So you're seeing this organ in your house. Your dad's sort of showing you stuff. Then walk us through the path of, then you got obsessed with Frank as a particular. You're hearing all kinds of music. So how did you get to saying, I want to pursue music as my career? Was it playing it, seeing did you see, what year were you born?
1961.
So did you watch the Beatles on TV?
No, I would have been too young.
That wasn't a tipping point. So I'm asking for sort of these tipping points when you decided there's two parts of this: to play music as a calling and then to write lyrics as a calling,
Right.
Both of those. Yeah.
Well, again, I was born in 1961 and my big brother, I was always around music. I had big brother, big sister, they bought records. So I was always around cool music. The sound, the music that plays in my head is of a rock band, if you will, instrumentation. I don't hear classical music in my head. It's all bass, drums, guitar, keyboards, that type of stuff. Anyway, my big brother bought Jimi Hendrix's first album, Are You Experienced, in 1967 when I was 6 years old. And I became a big Jimi Hendrix fan then. So this whole notion that somebody could be that cool and that good, that really struck me. And then as I grew up, I was seeing, buying a bunch more records and hearing a lot more music. It started going to rock concerts and this and that. But you're right. When I discovered Frank Zappa when I was in high school, that was the tipping point. As I may have mentioned to you before, I always wanted to be a visual artist. I thought I was going to be an artist. until I discovered Frank Zappa. And then I realized that's what I find most appealing. A person can be a composer in the electronic era, play electric guitar, and be creative in such a way. So my admiration for Frank made me think I need to go to college and study music composition. So I went and bought a brown SG, a guitar just like the one Frank has on the front of Roxy and Elsewhere. And then I went off to music school, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Well, let's go back a little. What so Jimmy's 67. What year did you find what you found apostrophe to start, right?
Right. I didn't discover Frank till I think it was a sophomore in high school, I think.
What
I mean, I had seen
what
pictures
year about?
that would have been probably 1977.
So that's 10 years after you discovered Jimmy. That's when you found apostrophe.
Yes. Yes. Well, I had
Wow.
seen pictures. I had seen pictures of Frank in rock and roll magazines. I'd seen the Zappa Crappa poster.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about him. I made the assumption that he was like a comedian type of guy.
Yeah.
Until I bought Apostrophe and I listened to that music. I was like, oh man, I misjudged this dude.
Yeah.
I didn't know people made music like that or wrote music like that or that musicians could play music like that. So that
Yeah.
piqued my curiosity.
Well, let's go back to visual artists. Did your parents raise you with like art books, going to art galleries? How did you establish that visual artist wannabe sense? Like, was there someone in your life paint? I mean, by visual artists, I was assuming you meant painting on canvas.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Well,
my parents were both raised on farms in southern Indiana. I was not raised in an artsy household by any means. I think I gravitated toward art just because I was kind of good at it. I was the type of kid I could look at something and then represent it well on a piece of paper. So then, of course, then people go, "Oh, that's a good drawing, Andy. You're good. You're an artist." So I just grew up with that mindset of, "Oh, I'm good at this." And then music was sort of similar, and then I found music to be. I don't mean to say easy, but it made sense to me. So visual art and music were kind of hand in hand as far as like how my brain works, I guess. And I just found them pleasurable and fun.
yeah, fun is
Yeah,
the key word.
yeah.
Really, really
Well,
good.
and then I became like a lot of kids. I became a big fan of like Mad Magazine and whatnot. So
Yeah.
the whole concept of cartooning, that kind of became my focus for a while.
But staying on visual art for a second, were there painters, any fine artists that did when you're discovering Jimmy, just before you're discovering Jimmy, you're saying, well, these people are praising me for my art skills. Were there any artists that stood out and you went, wow, you know, where like you got obsessed with Jimmy enough to say, hey, I'm leading towards this, how as youth, we try to form our identity by clombing on to some sort of movement like punk rock or,
Right.
Zappa fan or, this kind of art or that kind of art. Was there any kind of art, I mean, Mad Magazine is art, but it's not fine art.
Right.
In that fine art world, in that art museum or art gallery world.
No, there really was not. I at one point I was given an art kit, if you will, like a little attaché case looking thing with some pastels and some paints by a guy named Ron Nagy. Not that that matters, but it was like the Ron Nagy method, kind of like a Bob Ross type of character.
Right.
So I just read those books and I copied all the examples that were in his books, and they looked good. And people, again, I got positive reinforcement. I
Yeah.
would like to stress though that the art talent that I had, and even music talent back in those days, um, in Southern Indiana in those days, um, originality was not encouraged. I could look at something and I could make a piece of paper that looked like it.
Yeah.
Or if I was given a piece of music, I could learn that music and play it. But
Yeah.
I was never taught to develop my own style. That was a foreign concept to me, that a person would write their own music or come up with a unique artistic style. That was never
Yeah.
encouraged, really. And then once I got
Well,
a hold
it's
of Frank Zappa, I thought, oh, this is a creative dude. This guy's doing stuff. And like I mentioned, I liked Mad Magazine, so I have an appreciation for humor and kind of biting
right.
political satire. And I thought Zappa had it all.
Yeah, that really anticipated a question was how did you get this inspiration to what Harold Bloom talks about in the anxiety of influences? How do you absorb your influence and then abandon them rather than just regurgitate?
Right.
Like Stevie Ray is a great guitarist, and I don't want to hear Stevie Ray doing Hendrix. But once I heard a little of it, I was like, whoa, this guy's taking it a little farther. Whereas so many people are just Hendrix wannabes,
Right.
and that's fine in a way, but it's not what, I love that you put on some of your early rock bands, Mountain, Leslie West. That fucking lick in Mississippi Queen is like my lifeblood. It's like Freddie King going down. These are like licks that are part of my heartbeat, but they're not really Hendrix clones. They're in the zeitgeist of what Hendrix is creating, and he became the rock god.
Sure, sure. No,
Yeah.
Mountain was a big one in my household. We had all the Mountain records.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so let's go back to Jimmy in 67 and the thing about lyric writing. Where did you study? So then you're saying, well, I want to do this, pursue music. And then Frank, 10 years later, sort of kicks you over. Well, I can really do this because he did it. It's sort of like giving you sort of permission to find who Andy's music is. So this is different from lyric writing and music are sort of two different things. They're
Yeah.
close. The best is the Brill Building. They said, what came first? Or and they said the phone call. Like we need a song. So I mean, it sounds as though playing music came first to you and then lyric writing came.
Yes, yes. Well, when I was in high school, once I decided, and again, I got interested in pursuing music and learning to write music and whatnot. I spent my life savings on a TIAC 4-track reel-to-reel tape machine.
Yeah.
So then I just started making little instrumental pieces. I didn't really write lyrics. I mean, me and my friends would write like goofy joke songs sometimes, but I didn't write lyrics per se in a serious way for a number of years. It was always just instrumental pieces that I would concoct.
But then when did you start writing lyrics? When did Andy really go, well, I'm going to write lyrics? I mean, for real, because you have quite a few albums, Andy. And I mean, what percentage of them are instrumental? What percentage of them are?
2 or 3 of them are purely instrumental, but most of them, do feature lyrics.
Yeah.
What I would say about that is I was in a number of bands, just like bar bands, playing in nightclubs and whatnot, playing popular music of the day. Again, originality was not stressed. But I was in an original music band in the late 80s. It was called Sex Sells Magazines. And it was all original music, but we played the songs of the bass player. He was the band leader. It was his band, and I played his songs. And at one point, I started to write my own songs, thinking, well, maybe this band could, I'm in this band. Maybe I can write some songs for this band as well. But it turned out that was not the case. We were only going to do his songs. So then I thought, oh my God, I'm going to need to form my own band if we're going to hear my own songs. So I didn't start really writing songs proper with lyrics probably until like the late 80s.
And so
in my late 20s, I just really didn't write songs. You understand? I went away to music school and studied music composition, writing chamber pieces and studying orchestration. And I got a master's in that. Those aren't songs. When you study composition, you might set somebody else's text, but you don't write lyrics. Yeah. So that came late. It was pretty late once I finally decided, oh, I need to start writing songs of my own.
But okay, let's just go into this. So a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker.
Okay.
What role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing a Andy lyric song? It's specifically, what role does intention play in the lyric writing?
Maybe I don't quite understand your question.
So
Are you saying that do I start with, oh, I'm going to write a song about this subject matter? Like that?
no, it's not it that you put it in the context you want. There's something that motivates you to write a song. It's a song by Andy. It's both lyrics and music. I mean, it's really, the question is both. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing a song?
Well, I usually start with chords. I'll sit at a piano or at the guitar and I'll start figuring out chord changes that I find evocative. And then I usually will make a recording of that. And then I'll drive around in my car or whatever, listening to that over and over and over. And eventually words will start to form in my mind, little vocal parts, which will then lead to a phrase. And then usually that phrase then will sort of inform the rest of the song. So I kind of stumble upon the meaning of the songs after I've kind of laid the ground floor or the blueprint, if you will.
Yeah.
So very rarely do I go into a song thinking I need to write a song about this or that.
Right. But then where does the impetus come from to write the song in the first place?
Well, I've got music playing in my head all the time. I really do.
That's good. So you got it in your head and you want to get it out of your head. That's
Right.
the intention.
I liken it to having a radio in my head that if I want, I could turn it to the Zappa station. And right now I can hear in my head Zappa music. Or there's an original music station. And if I turn it over to the original music station, I will hear some original music playing in my head.
That's beautiful. That's so much that question I must ask you. First, we're in the antenna of the race. That Bob Dylan says that exact word. He says, I'm just tuning in. But that's like Thomas Nordig told me that. He said this was like 30 years ago. Thomas Nordig said to me, someday we'll be able to just think up a song and you can hear it. And it's like, that's it. Now you can go, I want to hear Johnny Darling by the Feathers. And
Right.
within a second, you can hit a button and hear it.
Right.
And I told Thomas, I says, that's called dreaming.
Well,
you can hear it.
The trick would be for me to sit here and think music and then for you to be able to hear it at the same time.
Right.
That's the next step.
Well,
I'm sorry. A lot of songs, I'll just get like a phrase that I find evocative. Like on one of my records, for example, I just use this for an example. I have a song called Uppercuts to the Upper Crust, which I think is just kind of a funny little bit of wordplay. So then I write a whole song around this notion of, punishing the bourgeois.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing about lyric writing I wanted to ask you, because you have this list of, let's say, puns, one-liners, aphorisms on your website. That is so. How many are there? It never ended. Do you know about approximately how many are there?
I don't know. There are at least a few hundred, I guess.
Yeah, a few hundred. So what is the roots of that? Well, you grow up, I mean, that's Mad Magazine again. That's like where you're reading stuff and you're watching movies and TV. But is that part? See, I'm trying to get to, along with this, whose lyrics were you emulating at first? Was it Jimmy, Dylan, or Frank? I mean, and how did you separate? I want to write Andy lyrics and not just regurgitate Dylan, Jimmy, and Frank.
Right. I think my earliest lyrics were more Frank influenced, and in a way that's not admirable. Writing songs, just kind of complaining and bitching about society and this or that way. That kind of thing that sometimes Zappa fans can have this kind of attitude. So some of my early songs were kind of like that. But I realized at some point that I needed to write songs that were true. And so I would write songs.
Where did you figure that one, Andy? When did you say I want to write? You mean true to Andy?
Yes, yeah, yes, yes. I can't write a blues song because I've never really felt those things, if you
Yeah,
will. But I could
yeah,
write a song like, for example, a loneliness. If it's an emotion that I have felt, then I could write a song about that.
yeah.
Or I could write songs about my relationships and the people, the people I've known and the things I've gone through, um, and be telling the truth. Now, stop me if we talked about this last time, but I found this out when I had to, get up in front of crowds and be the lead singer in a band, that certain songs lyrics will resonate with you and some will not. And
Yeah.
I found out right quick that singing some songs, even though they're cool songs and I love the songs, I felt like an idiot singing the lyrics because they didn't resonate with me at all, and some would. And so I realized, oh, I need to write lyrics that I could sing, and mean them.
You mean that
So,
you mean when you were doing covers of
yes.
somebody, you
Yeah.
were it was hard for you to sing it unless you knew it. Yeah.
Well, an example that would be like, I remember being in a band. I used to do these gigs because, like, the rock history professor would be playing down at the local nightclub.
Yeah.
And when we did some covers, I remember singing Ziggy Stardust, and I'm up on stage, and I can sing it. I mean, it's but I felt like a dumbass singing the lyrics because I didn't care about that. Jamming good with Weird and Gilly, that stuff, and I'm like, I felt like a jackass. But then, like, when
Boy,
we played,
Frank's loving this. He's loving this at this moment. This is
well,
so
when we would play like War Pigs by Black Sabbath, when they talk about politicians hide themselves away and they only start the war, that type of stuff. I was like, yeah, I could sing the hell out of this. I believed it, you know.
that is so good. But I forgot. I'm sorry to jump back, but did you paint the portrait of Frank that we're looking at? Or is that
No, no. There's a guy around town who's a great artist, and he did a whole bunch of Zappa paintings. And my wife had him do this one for me for our
that's
20th
good.
anniversary.
Okay. So this is staying on lyrics. That was really good. I wanted maybe you responded to this, but Louis Buñuel talking about the truth and pursuing the truth. Louis Buñuel said, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. So I know that's a funny statement. And, it's like, how do you detect truth? It didn't ring true for you to sing that Bowie lyric,
Right.
but what is it? What constitutes that feeling of truth for you to finally get to that point? Well, I got to sing songs that I wrote that are true to me. How do
Right.
you detect the truth?
Well, if a song is based upon fact, that automatically makes it true. Like I've written songs, about my parents' illness and their passing, so those are all just straight up autobiographical and true. And there are also songs that I would just say that I think it's true when it feels natural. It does not feel unnatural to state it.
Right.
If I pretended to be somebody I'm not, that would not feel right. It just has to feel right.
Yeah.
It has to feel like nothing in a way,
Yeah.
that you're not posturing.
Yeah. Feeling nothing. That's amazing you said that, because again, that line that Frank says just resonates with me completely. Nothing is what I want. Now, what he's saying is he's mocking Zen, but he did follow Zen philosophy in Eastern philosophy, like so many of us did, Ram Dass or Alan Watts.
Mhm.
And he's mocking it, but like Bob Marshall said so brilliantly, is that Frank reverently mocked what he loved the most. He loved black music, So he made fun of it. And nobody, I've said this a million times, nobody was making fun of Bob Marley. And in the middle of Joe's garage, he goes, "We're jamming." I mean, that is like, and it is, I'm glad you use the words complain and bitch, because in one of those Zappa documentaries, which are like PU in some ways, and they're important in other ways, one ex-band member said Frank attacked everybody on this album. And I'm like, he didn't attack, he was a satirist. It's not, I just don't like the word attack.
Right.
Complaining and bitching is better. So really fun.
I think he would hold up a mirror, and if that felt like an attack to you, then therein lies the problem.
Hello, that's the line. Watch the Nazis run your town. Now go home and check yourself. You think we're singing about somebody else. There's the mirror. So I'm
here.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I'm curious, staying on this, Andy writing a song. Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your audience when you're writing your song?
I don't think about an audience unless I'm only thinking about making a record. In all honesty, Jerry, I never really cared for live performance as much as other people. I never had the desire really to be on stage. I don't feed off the energy of the audience. I don't like that. I shouldn't say I don't like it, but that's not my goal. I always just think in terms of records. I just think what will make a good recording.
Yeah.
And if somebody hears it and likes it, great.
But you're not like, see, this is another thing Frank would say, and you've heard me say this before, is Frank said, I don't make music for other people. I make it for myself. And if other people like it, that's a bonus. It's like, yes. But Frank, you've been raised in a consumer commodity culture. You can't separate that from your being. If you hit these lyrics and these notes that people will buy your records, then you can keep making more records.
Right.
So, I mean, he did think of his audience to a point, because you so astutely taught me. I thought I was writing a hit record every time. That was one of the most enlightening things you've ever taught me. Yeah. Because there's a lot of funniness to it, but he knew as soon as he started writing Grunion Run and The World's Greatest Sinner and all his early songs, Any Way the Wind Blows, that's pop song. Come on.
Right.
And why can't that be a hit?
Right. I think that meant that he was making music that he thought was good. And if I think this is good, why doesn't everybody else think this is good?
And it's also, who's going to sell my music to the people who are going to buy it? And that Frank had so much input in the peddling of his early music, putting ads in comic books, knowing it was like horny white dudes in Long Island who were going to buy his, records. So put it in comic books.
Well, another thing about Frank is he needed to make a living.
Yeah.
What else was he going to do? And I think about this when I think of like blues musicians and R&B musicians growing up in America, throughout the 1900s. They didn't have a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
So a guy like James Brown, by God, he needed to go out there and work and make a living.
Hello.
And I would contrast that with people like, I don't know, say like Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground. Those were college kids.
I know.
Lou Reed had a degree in poetry from Syracuse University. If he didn't play rock music, he could have gone on and got a master's in poetry and become a college professor. James Brown was not going to become a college professor. Frank Zappa was not going to become a college professor. These guys needed to work. And so that's what they did. And that's why I helped make them so great, because they worked it. They desired it, and they worked for it.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I do think James Brown is one of the greatest lyricists. And they probably should have had him lecturing, like they hired Sun Ra to lecture at Berkeley, but he had to go on tour, so they fired him. And Frank lectured at colleges a couple times, so it was a one-off. But McLuhan says that everything we invent extends some humanness, like human sensorium, like knife and fork extends our teeth. The shutter in a camera is an extension of our eyelid. And even non-tangible, like philosophy or religion, might be an extension of consciousness. What does the guitar extend for you? What humanness?
Well, the music that I hear in my head,
Yeah.
it's a vehicle through which I can take the music in my head and make it heard by you.
Yeah. What's the function of music?
I think the function of music is pleasure. I know Frank. I don't mean to sound like I just think like Frank all the time, but he always called it entertainment.
Yeah.
Like the subject was entertainment. I think that is true, but I guess I think of it in terms of pleasure.
Yeah.
Pleasurable entertainment.
Yeah. No, we're going to get into entertainment too, because and education, because you became an educator to make your money. So you're not dependent. You're like Charles Ives. You're not dependent on selling records or
Right.
moving the merch to pay
Right.
for your families and your
Right.
needs and wants. So Aaron Copland says the four elements or ingredients of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. How would you explain, first of all, what is tone color to the normal human? Not in musical terms. What is tone color?
Well, just the quality of the sound itself.
Yeah.
I mean, a French horn makes a mellow tone. A bagpipe makes a harsh, shrill tone. Those are the colors, and you can combine tones to create new combinations and new colors, and that's what orchestration and arrangement is about.
Yeah. And then, how do you integrate the four? You sort of talked about getting a chord structure going, but where does the integration of those four come in when you're writing a song, an Andy song? Melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color.
Well, like I say, usually I start with harmony, like a chord progression or some combination of notes on the piano that I find evocative, and then those will allow you to then start to experiment with a melody that is supported by those harmonies. Rhythm, I think it kind of comes down to oftentimes I would add lyrics to that list. By the way, if we're talking about songs,
Yeah.
then oftentimes just what type of a feel do you need rhythmically? Does it need to be aggressive and kind of pushy, or does it need to be laid back and maybe be like a dance track or what have you? What is the hierarchy of the beats within the measure for you, and does this type of music warrant one or another? And then lyrics, and then how they lay in on top of that groove. Sometimes the grooves will be dictated by the lyrics themselves.
That's good. And indeed, Copland probably knows about this thing about lyrics, but him being an orchestral composer,
Right.
then you would say that lastly, the tone color would come in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. During the production stage in the studio, yes, or rehearsing the band for a live gig. What I meant, if that wasn't clear, that sometimes just the pulse of the lyrics themselves kind of dictates, if you will, how the musicians will play them. And in a song like, say, Bruce Springsteen's "Born to Run," it's like tramps like us, baby, we were born to run. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like where 1 and 3 are get stressed.
Yeah.
So that band plays that song that way, which I don't think is a good groove. You don't listen to Born to Run because it's a good groove. It has that kind of European 1, 2, 3, 4 type of a thing going on.
Yes.
Does this make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, a lot.
I like music just the opposite, where 2 and 4 are more important than their destinations. So that's part of the reason I don't like Bruce Springsteen's music all that much, because a lot of it's very 1 and 3. It's very European, white sounding.
It is totally, and it's so funny because Moon was had a phase where she liked to go to these groups where they played Springsteen music and everybody sang the lyrics. So it's called anthem rock, you know, and I think anthem rock is amazing. I'm more for like P-Funk, Parliament Funkadelic anthem rock. You know, give my where every George Clinton can hold the microphone to the audience and they'll sing every lyric. You know,
We want the funk.
yeah, I mean, I love it. And same with James Brown. So I like that. But Bruce Springsteen, again, I am not a fan. All the power to him. But he's a Mitch Ryder wannabe, and he wishes he could do Devil with the Blue Dress. Now, does Devil with the Blue Dress stress 2 and 4 or 1 and 3?
That's more of 1 and 3. Devil with the blue dress, blue dress, blue dress. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, you could take any song and flip it and play it with the other type of groove if you want.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and forgive me for beating a dead horse here, but it's like that Queen song, We Will Rock You. You know,
Yeah.
Do you hear it like mud on your face, big disgrace, slander my name all over the place? That's 1 and 3 E. And the opposite would be mud on my face, big disgrace, slander my name. Which one do you like better? I like the 2 and 4. I like, and it's a blacker groove. It's a dance groove. It's more like an African American derived groove.
Yeah.
And Frank liked that too, by the way. Even
Hello.
sometimes he let his bands get away from it.
I guess I'm admitting I'm a black wannabe too. So another friend resonates with Dave Liebman, the sax player who played with Miles Davis.
Mm-hmm.
He said the 3 tenets are hand, head, and heart. And my friend says it's technique, theory, and taste. So technique is you learned how to play the guitar. Theory is you knew the structure, the chords. How does one acquire taste?
I think just through exposure.
Yeah.
I think, and stop me if I use this analogy last time. I can't remember what we talked about last time. It's what I talk to people about, like when you're a kid, like if you're at a restaurant, sometimes they'll give you like a little box with 3 crayons in it. Have we talked about this?
No, go ahead. It's all right because this is new to me. Go ahead.
Like as a tiny little kid, maybe you'll go to the restaurant and they'll give you a kiddie menu and a little box with crayons. It has a blue and a red one and a yellow one. And so when you only have 3 crayons, it's easy to pick a favorite.
Yeah.
And then later on, you go to 1st grade and you get a box with 8 crayons in it. It's like, oh my God, now there's white and there's black and there's purple and there's orange and green. And then at some point you work your way up to the big gigantic box with 64 crayons in it.
Yeah.
And so you've just expanded your palette, if you will, literally and figuratively, to where you can start to draw distinctions and appreciate subtlety and nuance.
Yeah.
And that's where taste lies, I think.
Yeah. Subtlety and nuance is amazing things. How do we acquire that? Because this is continuing this word taste. McLuhan said, song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. So any comment on that? Because you know how this whole world music thing leaked in from when Frank was playing. You know how we learned world music? Because Olatunji's African music album. We started to hear that. Then we heard The Israelites by Desmond Decker on pop radio. That was reggae. We didn't know it was.
That was the very first record I ever bought as a little kid, is Israelites.
Did you know it was reggae when you bought it? No. And then we heard Mighty Mouse singing opera. And we heard Oh Happy Day is Edwin Hawkins singing gospel. This was all to us just pop music.
Sure.
So this is this thing about the reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. Any comment on that?
I think that makes sense because they're different. There are different dialects, and I think music has dialect in a similar fashion. This notion of music being slowed down speech, makes sense in a way. I think the biggest difference is with speech. When you begin a sentence, you don't even know how you're going to end it.
Yeah.
You're just going with the flow of whatever's going on. Now I'm cognizant of it. Every time I start a sentence, I don't know what the last word of it will be. But a song that is written, that's taken out of it.
Yeah.
It's like a speech that's been written. Now, there, when you go to start to play, to improvise, like a jazz player, like in Miles Davis's group or Frank Zappa playing a guitar solo, at every moment, it's like speaking. You don't know exactly where it's going to go. And that's where the mind and the heart and all these things come together in real time to allow you to hear it in your head, if you will, and it coming out of your body simultaneously without distortion.
Yeah. It's really good, Andy. I appreciate the fact that you actually listen. You know, there was two parts to that McLuhan quote. People don't like to hear that first part, that song is slow down speech. They don't quite get it. He's being poetic or metaphoric.
Sure.
And you understood how to suss it out. And I appreciate that, because it was wonderful when Frank played the Bulgarian Women's Choir as we walked into the concerts, whatever tour that was. He insisted on playing that before the Zappa show started. And, you know, they're not singing English words, but
Right.
they charted on the UK pop charts.
They did.
The Bulgarian Women's Choir charted in England. You know what else charted in England? 433 by John Cage. Literally, these guys have advanced pop charts in England or something. But you know, talking about this structure, I'm curious your reaction to this, and this is from Bob Marshall's interview with Frank. He says that the LA Free Press in the summer of '69, Frank Zappa mentioned Pauline Oliveros' work with sound above the audible and below, creating a mass. And he liked that. And Frank responded by saying, not that it created a mass, it created something audible. It produced a some indifference tone, which happened to be located within the audible frequency range.
Right.
By combining you couldn't hear it and something so low you couldn't hear it, it yields something in the middle that you could hear. Whether or not you liked what you heard in the middle is another question. The concept is brilliant. So I actually got to talk to Pauline Oliveros about this once, and she was like, oh, a little frazzled what Frank said. But I'm curious your take on what Frank's sort of describing there, this some indifference tone.
I mean, literally, physically, how that's possible, or what's at work there.
Why Frank brought it up, what all aspects of it, wherever you want to go. Yeah.
Well, if you combine any two pitches, there will be a different tone. It's like when you're trying to tune two strings on a guitar. When they come close, you'll hear a one, 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 and as you get them in tune, that'll one, one, it'll slow down.
Yeah.
So there is a difference tone between these two. And Frank was just saying you can take one so high you can't hear it and combine it with one so low you can't hear it. The difference tone between the two will be in the audible range. And I think he even said later in that interview that could explain any number of types of other like physical occurrences. And I think Bob said, like UFOs, for example, and Frank said exactly. So something that shows up like as a bright light in the sky or whatever it might be could be the results of things above what we can perceive, combining with things we cannot perceive to create something in between that we can perceive. Now, in the music of Frank Zappa, I don't really like this notion of high and low in terms of like high art and low art.
Yeah.
But some people might say that, Frank's like orchestral music and this kind of like Varese, Stravinsky side of him might signify high art, and then like making like funny sexual songs might be low art. But he was combining those in a similar way, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I appreciate that, because I was interested somewhere. I think it's in your Will Profess, for food documentary about you, the 10-minute doc. you say the word art music. You said you started to pursue writing art music. And I thought that was an interesting way to put it, because in a lot of ways, what Frank did was he created what's called chamber rock almost.
Mhm.
He's not really a classical composer. He's an orchestral composer, or actually John Smothers says it best. It's not like the Moody Blues use, or Procol Harum use an orchestra to enhance the rock sound.
Right.
It's like John Smothers said, Frank used a rock band to sound like an orchestra.
Sure. Mhm.
And so it's interesting that to describe what Frank invented, was it theatrical rock? Was it chamber rock? Because you said early on you weren't writing classical music or chamber music, but you were studying it.
Right. Right. Yeah, if you're studying music composition, well, back when I did, you were expected to write for classical instrumentation and instrumental music. So you'd write a string quartet, or you'd write a brass quintet, what have you. And so that's just a different thought process than writing a song. Because with a song, you understand, you can just write a verse and a chorus, and then you can keep changing the words.
Yeah.
So you can have an 8-minute long song with very little difference from moment to moment, other than the lyrics might change. But in art music, you have to sustain the audience's interest throughout a long instrumental piece of music. And Frank could do that. Frank was very good at that.
Yeah. But he also did this funny thing, because when we're growing up listening to Frank, and then all of a sudden Orchestral Favorites comes out, and we go, wait a minute, this is orchestral music, but it's got these rock songs in it. Then we started finding Frank's first 2 movie scores, Run Home Slow and The World's Greatest Center, and we go, oh, well, there's the roots in an orchestral movie soundtrack of a song that he eventually wrote.
Right, right. They show up on burnt weenie sandwich.
Exactly. It was amazing. Well, what's more fundamental, language or music?
Fundamental?
Yeah.
I would say music. I would think
Yeah.
anybody in any culture who has ears can appreciate any music from anywhere else. But only the languages that you can speak can you actually understand.
Yeah. But it is amazing. I always am thrilled when Frank sort of turned us on to the Tuva Throat Singers. I mean, he actually, Richard Feynman brought him to he brought him over to Frank's house first, and he
Right.
was the guy who got him on Johnny Carson and in the Rose Bowl parade. Can you imagine? We went to Pasadena and saw these guys in a free concert outside in a park. And we learned that their music was really transcendental and really affected us. But they sang about 3 things: their boots, their horses, and snow. That's all the lyrical content's about.
Is that true? I've never heard that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's basically what I learned from studying their music a little,
That's
but
funny.
have you seen Genghis Blues, the movie? You should seek it out. It's
I
about,
have seen that.
yeah,
It's been a while, but
and
yes.
it susses it out a little, but I'm curious, back to your music that you create.
Mhm.
This is Ben Ratliff. He wrote a book on Bill Frisell, and he says, I mean sound as it has long functioned among jazz players as a mystical term of art, as in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard at best in a single note. So, like, me and you could hear Miles and go, oh, that's Miles. We could hear Frank and go, oh, that's Frank, just in a note or two.
Right.
And so basically the question is the two words that Ben called Miles' sound, fragile and pointed. He said John Coltrane was slightly undercooked and urgent. So, if a music writer that you really respected was writing about Andy's sound, which two words would you find to say that guy got it? You would be honored that they would capture your sound in a couple words. What two words?
Oh, I would think, I guess I just think in terms of like my harmonies, rich,
Yeah.
and a bit romantic.
That's nice. 2 hour words. What would you think Frank would be honored if they captured his sound in a couple words, describing Frank's sound in a couple words?
Oh, I don't know. Words fail me at this moment, Jerry. I don't know what
That's all right. Let's move on, because here's another thing that you pursued, and you can tell the history of it a little, is being an educator. And I mean, what a life, Andy. You got a wife and 2 daughters, and you live in a great home in a great state, and you make music, but you can make your money teaching people about music. And
Right.
it's the kind of music you love. That's like the epitome of your job, is when you get your life and your job as mixed up as possible.
Yes.
And so this is McLuhan in 1957. It's misleading to suppose there's any basic difference between education and entertainment. However, it's always been true, whatever pleases teaches more effectively. So it's just discussing this difference between Frank stressed education. He said, go to the library and teach yourself.
Right.
You've teach for decades. Frank Zappa, Brian Wilson, Jimi Hendrix, blues. It's amazing. I'm so happy that someone could have a career doing that. But at the same time, people would go, well, that's entertainment. And we know, me and you learned a lot from Jimi Hendrix, Frank Zappa, and Bob Dylan about life and education. In fact, Dylan said it best. He said, don't ever tell anyone everything you know. And he got that from the Bible. And it's like, if me and you met each other at a party, we'd start telling each other everything we know. It's like, tell me more, And so how do you suss this out, with them saying they're entertainers, and this line that goes, whatever pleases teaches more effectively? There's a lot of key words there. What pleases us, what teaches us, and what does effectively mean?
Well, I think when he says what pleases teaches most effectively is anything that people find pleasing, they will desire it.
Yeah.
If something is a turnoff, they're not going to want to study that or
Yeah.
pursue that. So that makes perfect sense. That music being as pleasing as it is, it makes people crave it and want more. So that kind of writes itself. Seemed like I had another point I was going to make there. You also said you continued with that quote. I'm sorry.
You mean the quote by McLuhan, or?
Yes, that you were just
Yeah.
reading to me.
Well, let me read the whole thing to you, because I usually leave out the middle, but it susses it out. It's misleading to suppose there's any basic difference between education and entertainment. This distinction merely relieves people of the responsibility of looking into the matter. It's like setting up a distinction between didactic and lyric poetry on the ground that one teaches and the other one pleases. However, it's always been true that whatever pleases teaches more effectively.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I had someplace I was going with that, and I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. Well,
No,
you
no. Here, I'm sorry. Here, I do know what I was going to say.
okay,
The,
great.
the stuff that I teach, like again, a course on the music of Frank Zappa or Jimi Hendrix, or whoever we might be studying in the history of rock or blues courses. I think at the most basic level, what I'm doing is showing people, look, here's a person who succeeded. Here's a
Yeah,
person who had some talent, and invariably they were hard workers, and they were able to rise up out of whatever humble beginnings that they had, and change the world. And
yeah,
therein lies the message, really, that if Jimi Hendrix could be a poor kid in Seattle, or Frank Zappa could be a lower middle class kid out in the desert in Lancaster, California, and go on to become these world famous musicians and thinkers and motivators, that why not you? I think
yeah,
everybody should just look at all these musicians and go, well, they did it. It's possible. You just have
yeah,
to see that it's possible. And I think that's what I'm showing people.
yeah. That's good. So you're giving kids hope,
I hope.
and yeah, but you got a work ethic too, because you're dedicated to doing a syllabus, and you're just like, oh, okay, I've done. Most people, the cliche is you leave your career after 10 years and you switch careers, and
Right.
you found your career. So where did you get, what's the roots of your work ethic? Where did you get your work ethic from?
Well, I think like what I was talking about earlier, that when I would do a drawing and it looked pretty good, and people would say, "Good, Andy, you're a good artist, good boy."
Yeah,
I think I've always just wanted to do well.
yeah,
I just, whatever I was going to do, I just wanted to do it well,
yeah,
and so being a teacher, I want to do that well. If I make some
yeah,
music, I want to do that well. And really, even maybe what even comes before that last lesson I was talking about, how people are able to to do these things, that I think a person needs to understand the feeling of consciously doing well. Whether
yeah,
if you're following a recipe, or if you're making a sandwich, or whether it doesn't matter what you're doing, if you're pursuing that in that moment with the concept of I want to do this well, that is a
yeah,
mindset that translates into all aspects of day-to-day living. And so you may find that this person over here just seems to do everything pretty well. And that's
yeah,
that's the person who has their finger on the pulse, I think.
yeah. That's amazing because
It's a
McLuhan,
mindset. It's a mindset.
it's a mindset. Compulsion comes up a lot. To some people are just compulsive. Work ethic is a funny word because about third paragraph down in Wikipedia, it says this could be a scam from consumer culture to get you to, dedicate your life. But most people get their work ethic from their parents. But it's an amazing thing, because the desire to succeed, that you see this person succeeding at what they're doing. And Marshall loved this line: the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can.
Yeah, there you
So,
go. Sure.
you don't have to say, I'm going to succeed because I want to make a lot of money. I mean, when kids started making music in the 60s, it seemed more innocent. They were like, I just want to have fun and do something I love to do. It's
Yeah,
like skateboarding. And then it became a commodity. And now you go, what do you want to be? And they go, a rock star. They don't go, I want to be a great musician. They go, I want to be a rock star. It's like,
right.
wait a minute, there's a difference here.
That's right. You're exactly right. And these are people that like have grown up playing that little Guitar Hero
Yeah.
video game, what have you, and they think, oh, I'm good at playing this music on this little fake little plastic guitar. Maybe I could be a rock star.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, man,
Maybe they could. I don't know.
I mean, I want you to come out to Venice again, because yesterday it was unbelievable. I haven't been going to the boardwalk recently as much because I'm making a film, but I went down there and there was like 5 encounters with street bands that were mind blowing. I
Mhm.
mean, these kids were doing like just incredible music. And they, you know, they had their tip jar out, but they weren't doing it to make tips. They were doing it because they loved to play for many hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that leads us onward and upward. Andy, what's more important, conviction or compromise?
Conviction.
You've accomplished a lot in your life. How do you rate these three elements? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, the second and third?
I would say skill and ambition maybe tie for the top. Luck, I don't know that I really think in those terms.
Yeah.
I mean, ambition. I mean, having great skill is only you need ambition. You can have great skill, but if you have no ambition, you're not going to accomplish anything. And you can have a lot of ambition, but if you don't have any skill, you're not going to accomplish anything. So I'd say skill and ambition just go hand in hand.
It's great. Yeah.
I can't prove luck. I can't prove that there's such a thing as luck.
Well, I like golfer Gary Player said, the more you practice, the luckier you get.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. That's good.
And that goes back to, you know, hanging in there and being, you know, dedicated, or back to the work ethic. Like you're teaching these students that these people were hard workers, you know.
Yeah. Yes. James Brown, we're back to James Brown and Frank Zappa, the two hardest working people in show business.
Yeah.
And you say we oftentimes get our work ethic from our parents. I would say in my case that could very well be the case. My dad was if there's such a thing as a workaholic, my dad was a workaholic. He worked and worked and worked and worked. But people from that generation oftentimes did.
Yep.
I'm the type of guy, I always tell people that if you give me a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, I'm not going to stop at 800. I'll see it through. I want to finish.
Whoa. Yeah. Well, two of my film heroes have these mantras. George Manupelli said, ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas said, there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, who's listed in Freak Out as an influence, says he's just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. So I know it's a stupid question and it's a little bit of both, but is art making, music making more self-expression, or more you're a vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
I guess I think self-expression.
Yeah.
Like I say, when I turn my mental radio to the original music station, I think it's just coming from some part of me that is able to conjure that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can art making, music making be egoless?
I suppose. I don't know. I don't have firm thoughts on that. I think how people use the word ego varies from person to person, and how people even define the word to the listener, it varies greatly from person to person. So that's one of those topics that is a bit sketchy to me.
Yeah. No, it's a deep topic because it's about we study in our Carl Jung group the difference between self and ego. Do you know who you are? This whole thing about identity, you know.
Right. I can remember learning those back in whatever classes I was taking about the id, the ego, and the superego. And I'll admit it never really made sense to me.
Yeah.
I remember once talking to Gail Zappa, and I said something to the effect of, you know, I observe myself thinking. When I'm thinking thoughts, again, I always think in English, but it's almost like, and I said something to the effect of, you know, who am I thinking to? It's like I'm being interviewed, like I have to describe, you know, how I'm feeling to some observer or interviewer. And she said, oh, that's your ego. And I don't know if you would agree with Gail on that one or not.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. You know, it is a deep word because the word egotistical gets put in the same category, which means, you know, you're pushing too much of yourself. That's like a negative thing. But I think Frank knew who he was, or he kind of convinced himself who he was, And so then people would say, well, you're egotistical, you know. But this is Shelly Manne, the great jazz drummer. I got to talk to him once about Frank because he plays on a Frank Zappa album. And I says, what was it like? And he said, Frank knew what he wanted and he got what he wanted. And so it's hard to know what you want. Another Frank hero, Igor Stravinsky, said, most people don't know what they like what they know. So, you know, if you feed people Bruce Springsteen, then they're going to say, what's your favorite music? Bruce Springsteen. But if you feed them Billie Holiday, Bruce Springsteen, and the Shags, then they have more options.
Right.
But it's what do they hear dominantly is what's, you know.
Well, that's why I talk in terms of, you know, I observe whatever, maybe appreciate music or this or that. And then there's a side of me that observes myself observing.
Yeah, that's good.
I think you can learn from that. I think, you know, when you talk about Frank, you know, being able, he knew what he wanted, was able to get it. He could do it. He could get it quickly. And that's why he could go into a studio like to make the Hot Rats album or whatever and get some session players together and bam, in a matter of hours, have these basic tracks all down. You know what I'm trying to say? He could whip a band into shape quickly. Well, like when he did the New York record with the band from Saturday Night Live, and then they went and played those shows in New York. I'm going, oh my God, how could he get that band to sound that good that quickly? And this notion of getting results quickly is again where I think is what we're talking about when we talk about genius. You know, like how quickly can you learn a foreign language? How quickly can you learn calculus? And I think Frank was quick. Yeah. And part of that comes from his assuredness.
That's it. And then people would criticize me as he's an egotist. No, he's just confident, and he knows how to fail. He has that great line, I'm a failure, but I'm not a miserable failure. He knows that he can fail. And, you know, it's easy for John Zorn to say the common line, oh, I like his first 3 albums. It's like, dude, the guy put out 60 albums. You mean you stopped listening after you miss Redunzel? That's, you know, that's your failing. I only like his first 3 albums. That's lame because there's so much in the 60. And there's so many things in the 60 albums. But yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. And like when Frank was at work, he was paying the bills. He didn't have time to have people come in and try to shake his resolve.
Yeah.
And if those people, you know, would walk away going, well, that Frank Zappa, he's, you know, he's egotistical or he's an asshole or whatever, I'd be like, that's easy for you to say. It's just because your feelings are hurt that he didn't stop what he was doing to assuage you. That's why some of his musicians, they talk about him being the nicest, most generous, you know, dude in the world. And then somebody else might describe him as being temperamental or mean or an asshole or whatever. And I'd say those were the people who gave him problems.
Duh. That's evident. You know, that's like, you know, again, criticizing the documentaries on him, saying he didn't hug people. Give me a break, you know. I mean, Jesus, that's ridiculous. You know, everybody doesn't hug everybody all the time. But you know, what you were saying is funny because the most watched TED Talk ever is Fake It to Make It. So whether Frank was true, you know, Frank doubted himself. He knew where he was failing, but he went along and had that the word you use, assuredness. But I love you saying genius, because people say he was a genius, you know, and that word was funny because I want you to meet this drummer, Don, from San Francisco. He just loves to talk about Frank, and he's really enlightened me in a lot of ways. And he said that Frank said, I haven't found this yet, so if you ever find it, let me know, that Frank said, he thought it was in a San Francisco Chronicle article. Frank said, genius is stealing from someone, you know, and you're not able to tell who you stole it from. Yeah. And so it's similar to T.S. Eliot said, the mature poet steals and the immature poet imitates. So, you know, Frank literally stole from John Cage in Gregory Peccary. There's a pile of radios all tuned to a different station. And we literally asked Frank once, did you get that from John Cage? And he said, no, you know, and it doesn't matter. But the beauty was he said no. You know, you know, we talked about serial music, you know, he called it Looperama, you know, because John Adams went and visited Frank and Philip Glass. Yes, he visited. And Philip Glass, my friends like loves Philip Glass. I'm like, okay, you know, but Philip Glass's book came out and he said he learned everything he knows from going to the Garrick Theater and watching the Mothers.
Really?
Well, not quite that, but I
didn't know. I'd never seen that Philip Glass appreciated Frank. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad.
There it is. It's in his book. He said he went to the Garrick and saw the Mothers. So anyways, it doesn't matter. It's how you come across, like you feel assured, that genius, you know. But if you ever find that quote, it's geniuses, because I mean, Frank was a Spike Jones Varese wannabe. That's evident. but he really took it, you know, a little farther by adding Johnny Guitar Watson in, you know, a little comedy, you know, Lord Buckley or Lenny Bruce. So McLuhan probed Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, who again, Frank mentions James Joyce in Freak Out, is saying that artists dream awake. Everybody has this creative force to create in the middle of the night these scenarios called dreams.
Yes.
Artists, and not to sound elitist, but artists also dream awake. Have dreams played a role in your creative process in writing songs?
Very rarely. I can point to one record I released. I even put it in the liner notes that one night I was locked in a dream. It kept looping and looping and looping. And in that dream, I was hearing a Hank Williams song, like an unreleased Hank Williams song.
Yeah.
And then when I woke up, I was able to remember it, and I wrote it down, and I put it on a record. And that's the one instance where I could say, kind of like with Paul McCartney when he dreamed Yesterday. Yeah, I could say, yes, this song I dreamed, and it was a Hank Williams song, an unreleased Hank Williams song. But that's a rarity.
Right. But I like what Hank Williams, because I do feel he is one of the great lyricists of American songbook. Sure. You know, and they asked him, what influenced your lyric writing? And he said, comic books.
Hank Williams said that?
Yes, which is amazing, because it is a form of storytelling. It's like what Lenny Bruce learned from Lord Buckley was turning joke telling into storytelling.
Okay.
That's what Scott Tunis emphasized about Frank. He said he was a storyteller. You know, we don't realize Billy the Mountain, these, you know, Frank's telling stories. Gregory Peccary, right. You know, it's an amazing thing that usually doesn't get tagged onto Frank's, you know.
That's a good point. That's a good point. But I think a guy like Frank, who, outside of like, R&B and doo-wop, which a lot of those songs were love songs, and Frank loved those, but he had no desire really to write love songs. He always was kind of bad-mouthing love lyrics, except when it had that kind of like an R&B connotation. And he was not one to feature his hurt, that kind of that phrase he used about Jeff Simmons. He could feature his hurt, people talking about their problems and stuff. Well, if you take love out of the equation and featuring your hurt out of the equation, what are you going to sing about or write about then? And so then these characters come out. I think he would distort his own personal experiences and then turn them into songs in a way that they're based upon reality, but they're distorted enough to where they just seem nonsensical.
Yeah. It's very well put. In fact, another great storyteller, Lewis Carroll, said, "I believe in as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." Andy, have you believed in any impossible things lately?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Well, tell
One
me,
other thing I'll say about Frank, if you don't mind, before we move on from this subject, again,
please.
because he loved blues and R&B so much as a
Yeah,
young man, and because I teach a course on the history of the blues, and we talk about R&B and blah blah blah, there were a lot of sexual lyrics,
yeah,
double entendre songs, and sexual lyrics, and rock and roll meaning sex and whatnot throughout the blues, like the
yeah,
20s, 30s, 40s, and then once we got into the 50s, and then white people started to appreciate R&B, the sexual component was
yeah,
quashed.
yeah,
And so what you find then, that music became relatively neutered. And I
yeah.
think that when people bitch about Frank Zappa writing sexual songs or nasty songs or whatever, I'm thinking, no, he's continuing the tradition
You
of blues
continue
and
to
R&B
push
that he loved as a kid. And I
comes.
appreciate that. I'm not offended by sexual double entendre songs or whatever. I think they're a scream.
Yeah,
So
and it doesn't even have to be double entendre.
that's right.
It's the difference between my wife, who's comes out of Bessie Smith, which is more implied, in Frank Zappa, which is outright, literal,
Right, right.
and
Well, you know that Bessie Smith song called "Nobody Bakes Jelly Roll Like Mine."
well, that's the
That's a
exactly
good example. That's a
that
good
that
that's a good double entendre song. I
That
love
that's exactly what I'm talking about. But Frank would be blatant because he did a cover of the Clovers' "Cocksucker's Ball," which couldn't get released. And it is a bootleg, no, it's an unreleased 45 that you can hear on YouTube. But Frank did a cover of it because it described what he wanted to say. You know. Well, tell me one, Andy, you've been doing this for many decades, teaching and making music. Tell me one major element of your creativeness that has stayed the same, and one major element that's changed.
I'm sorry, a major creative element that has
Yeah,
remained
one
unchanged?
major element in your creativeness. One major thing in you being creative as an educator and a music maker that stayed the same since you started, and one major element that's changed.
I'm not sure if I'm answering your question correctly or not, but I would say like my love of the guitar
Yeah,
has
that's
remained
stayed.
has remained unchanged.
Love of
My
guitar.
harmonic sensibility has remained unchanged. I haven't delved into other systems
Yeah,
in that regard.
and that's what stayed the same. What's one major element that's changed in the years you've been doing this?
Well, when I was young, back in the 80s, whatever, I liked a lot of punk music and this and that. And so I used to, I was more likely to write songs that were like aggressive. And so
Yeah,
that is not really the case anymore. I write very little music that is like pushy or aggressive
yeah.
in that kind of way.
But how about as an educator? Has you found your approach changed, or has it remained the same? What have you learned from teaching all these years about how to reach students and commu- communicate with them?
I don't know that has changed. I've just always felt, and became because I got positive reinforcement or comments from my students, that they just love the fact that I obviously love the music itself. So
Yeah,
that's just the bedrock of the way I am in the classroom and outside the classroom. I just try to be honest about all that stuff, and I think people appreciate that. I think I've become more laid back and more appreciative, across this broader musical spectrum. I think when you're young and I started off, and when you're young, you tend to be kind of cocky about what you like and what you don't like, and
yeah,
yeah, I've become more appreciative. My
yeah,
box of crayons has gotten huge by this point in
yeah.
time now, Jerry.
Yeah, no, I'm much more tolerant. I
Yeah.
watch the music act on Saturday Night Live every week just for a couple minutes to see what is new and cutting.
Right,
And
right,
it's very interesting if I get past 20 seconds or I watch, a half a minute, you
right.
know.
Well, what I tell people is try as you might, you will never hear all the good music. Maybe you've
Yeah,
heard me say this, but there's so much good music. It's futile to even think you're going to really get even the majority of it and hear it and appreciate it in any way.
yeah.
So I just let people know that they're awash in good things, musically and in other aspects. There's plenty to appreciate in this world, and
There's
don't
there's always
fear,
something you can learn new. Yeah.
don't fear. We're not going to run out of good stuff.
Yeah. Mushy Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Um, well, believe it or not, growing up, I was always very self-conscious. So this concept of my having to stand up in front of a lecture hall full of 300 some odd people and pontificate is totally at odds with my natural state. I didn't say that very well, but I've just had to. My weakness is one of being self-conscious and getting butterflies in my stomach and stage fright type of feeling when I was young. To get beyond that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What?
and that came from being a professional musician. After playing music long enough, you get to where it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You get on stage and you just do it. It stops bothering you.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I would have to say.
No, that's good. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
Difference?
Yeah.
I think women. My experience has been, I think that women are better communicators,
Yeah.
and that's what I like.
Yes.
I was so glad to have daughters because they could talk and talk and talk and talk. I love talking to my kids. And I have friends who had boys, and they told me the exact opposite, that
Wow.
boys just didn't talk much. So anyway, my limited experience has been, I think women are more accepting, and I
Yeah.
think that they're more giving, and they communicate better.
Yeah.
I don't mean to offend all the men watching this, by the way, but I think that there are aspects of womanhood that men would be wise to emulate.
Yeah, I agree. Um, there's a line, Andy, that goes, "You create what you resist." Bob Goldthwait morphed it into "You are what you hate." And James Joyce said, "It's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve." Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." So I'm just curious your thoughts on this line. You create what you resist. I'm not saying you, Andy, like one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I remember a million years ago when I first started writing songs, I remember writing a song where the hook line was, "You create the need for what you say you hate the most."
Wow.
An example would be that an outlaw creates the need for cops.
Yeah.
The people that you try to avoid, you've created the need for them.
Yeah.
That would be one example.
It is. It's incredible.
Well, you set up a dynamic where the opposite becomes necessary,
Yeah.
but at the same time, they're the same on some level. It's like people who are in jail and prison guards. They both agree to go to be in that jail. Does that make any sense?
It
You
makes a lot of sense.
can say that prison guards and prisoners are the opposite of one another, and I'm thinking, no, they're both in jail.
They're both. Sun Ra said it so well. He says, everybody's in jail. It's just that my jail's the best jail.
It's a fun jail. Yeah, that's funny.
It's like, I interviewed Lisa Popeil
Mhm.
like a week ago, and I didn't know she went to the tryout with her boyfriend not as a musician trying out for Frank's band. Did you know this?
No, I don't think I did. No.
Oh, you got to hear the whole story. And then she got swooped in to being in Frank's band for like 3 weeks, and the boyfriend didn't get the gig. and she said her fingers swelled up from playing the piano so much, and it was horrible. She couldn't handle it. And then Frank realized, oh, you're not right for this gig. So she was like, thank God.
So by mutual agreement, they realized this needs to stop.
Right, but it's still like she hung out rehearsing for like 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, the fact that she recorded Teenage Prostitute, I mean, she did her service. She added her ingredient to this Frank Zappa song. If she had never done anything else, which I guess she didn't, she did enough.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing story. Listen, so we got about 5-10 more minutes. I really appreciate this, Andy.
Sure.
Here's 5 quick questions from Alan Watts, just off the top of your head.
Okay.
Number 1, who started it all? Just in a few words. You don't have to overthink these. So number 1 is, who started it all?
I would say each person starts it all.
That's good. Are we going to make it?
Yes.
Where do we put it?
In the past.
Who's cleaning it up?
No one.
Is it serious?
Nah, not really. No.
Yeah. Frank was great at saying, I'm very serious about being not serious.
Do I hear somebody laughing? Is there somebody there sitting with
you? Yeah,
you?
that's my wife, Susie.
Is that, you told me once a story. Oh, well, there you are. Jerry, you told me a story 1,000,000 years ago about you guys going out to Don or Captain Beefheart's house and her singing a Bessie Smith song through the open window at Captain Beefheart's house. Is this the same person?
This is the same person. Yeah.
All right. There
Same
you go.
wife.
Same wife.
He's a good husband.
She actually did that in then she also did a gig with Tommy Mars, and they did Yo Cats together.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
You know, I was out in California when Don died.
Yeah.
Right after he died. And what was the name of the city that he was living in?
Trinidad or
Trinidad. Yes.
Yeah,
I was in Trinidad, and I was asking everybody, where did Captain Beefheart live? Where did Don live? And everybody was like, I don't know. And there were people saying, I didn't even know that guy lived in this town until I read his obituary in Rolling Stone. You know, he was a total cipher to the population of Trinidad.
There were a few people, but yeah, he had a huge impact on my life, and I was lucky because he called me 52 times in the year of 1991, once a week in the middle of the night, and we had these long conversations. And his music. I mean, a lot of Zappa fans are either on the fence. I like Frank and I don't like Beefheart. They don't give him that, but the time, if you spend the time with Beefheart's music, it is amazing.
Well, a long time ago, just for a couple of years, before I developed the blues class, I had a little course, a course devoted to 3 artists. And at that time it was called Beach Boys, Beefheart, and the Residents. And so I would spend a third of the semester talking about Beach Boys, and then a third of the semester on Beefheart, and then a third of the semester on the Residents. That was a funny little class.
That's very incredible because I'm huge Residents fan. And Probe and Gregory, I just had him on my podcast a couple months ago. He's been playing with Brian a lot. So that was very interesting too. So a few more and we're out of here. How do you find peace of mind?
I stay home. I'm a bit of a homebody. I'll admit it.
If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
In all honesty, because I am very, very happy with my life as it is today, I wouldn't say a damn thing to him.
Yeah.
For fear of changing anything.
Anything. Exactly.
You know, that wing of a butterfly beating.
Hello. I know about that.
That whole type of thing. No, I really wouldn't. I might give him a, how you doing?
Yeah. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll? Over or under?
Over.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Will profess for food.
Oh, that is good. They want to scent the publisher wants to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Purple.
Oh, I didn't know purple had a smell. That's
Well,
good.
you know, I say that sort of joking, but there have been a few times in my life, you know, people talk in terms of synesthesia.
Yeah.
And there have been times when I've smelled things that to me smell purple. And it's not because they smell like a purple thing, but there are some smells that just make me think purple.
Well, Andy, that's amazing because my last name means violet, Violet.
There you
And
go.
I often say I was into purple, violet before Jimmy and Prince.
That's right.
And, you know, it's been my life, purple. So to think there's a smell to purple's amazing. In fact, Mark Twain said it so well, connecting it. Forgiveness is the smell that the violet releases when the foot steps on it. If a statue was built, say it again.
I said that's good. That's a good.
Yeah, that is good. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed, and what would it be made of?
Oh, I think it'd be made of wood, and it'd be somewhere in the Hoosier National Forest.
I like that. Our
So
friend,
people would have to kind of trek out there and find it.
I like
And
that.
wood, so it's relatively temporary.
Our friend who married us in Paoli, Indiana, helps save the Hoosier National Forest all the time. Andy Mahler. I should hook you up. He's a distant relative of Gustav Mahler.
Really?
And he lives in Paoli, and he's a forest activist. He spends his life keeping people from, you know what they tear the forest, the trees down for mainly to make pallets.
Really?
That's the main destruction of the forest, is to make pallets. And then the thing about pallets is then they're used once and they don't really reuse them.
Right.
They just trash them.
I'd never heard of such a thing. That's pretty weird.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good I've never had and I do not want?
Yeah.
Excessive travel. I've never been to New York and I just soon never go. Let's put it that way.
Excessive travel is I never got that. The three answers I get the most are fame, money, and heroin. But excessive travel is actually a legitimate, reasonable answer.
Well, I fear I'm going to come across as some type of hermit or something, saying that I'm a homebody and I don't want to travel. I enjoy all of these things, but I just need to stress that I don't need these things.
Yeah.
There are a lot of great things in this world, but I'm fine without them. And so I don't want to have the things I'm fine without.
I am going through that right now in my life. We go to a music festival every year. Susie's sung there in Maine for 33 years. And I'm not going this year because I don't like to do this travel thing anymore. I'm just too old for it. And it's fine, but it is, the word excessive is the key word. Travel's fine, but excessive travel.
Right. Exactly.
If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I would duck. I'd go into the vomit to avoid this bag of shit. Yes, I would.
What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
The cultural shift. I would say just sort of in general, what people are experiencing now as far as like gender is concerned, it's just
Yeah.
one more constant reminder that the things that people one generation takes for granted, at some point later on will be revealed to be tenuous. So
Yeah.
I like the fact that young people are always causing older people to reevaluate and adopt new thought processes. And right now, I think that's maybe the one that's getting the most attention.
Yeah.
And it causes old people to panic or to get
Oh yeah.
scared or whatever, but I think that's just all part of it.
It's a growing process.
Yes.
So Thornton Wilder said in 1928, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. So, Andy, you've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes today in over 2 hours of part one. The question is, I'm not implying you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
What's it really all about?
Yeah.
You talking about art?
Well, again, you put in the context you want: life, art, whatever. Yeah.
Uh, I wish I had the perfect thing to say. I'm kind of baffled by this question. What it's all about? I'd say it's about nothing. Well, that's
Yeah.
the concept of nothingness. I don't have an answer to that. I'd say nothing is the answer.
Nothing is the answer is beautiful.
I
You
am
know,
I am comfortable with the concept of nothingness. I'm not just clowning around here. If when I die, there's absolutely nothing, I'm fine with that.
yeah.
Totally fine with nothingness.
Yeah. You
It doesn't
you
bother
talk
me.
it's an amazing concept. I have a whole lecture on nothingness, in fact. And just back to Frank's line, nothing is what I want, is such an ironic, playful twist on it.
Mhm.
But we're doing this film right now about why do humans feel obliged to preserve whatever they got? Like, you have this amazing library in back of you, and you have, an immense collection of music. What's going to happen to that when you pass? Do you say to your wife and kids, take care of this, or does it go into an archive, or do you just say trash it? Because it's a big phenomenon that I've wanted to deal with the Zappa estate. It's like there's such a huge collection of Zappa stuff out there, and I know a lot of these guys who die in their loved ones throw it in a dumpster.
Right.
And it should be like the Dylan, where you get somebody who's got $1 billion and they put it into an archive and turn it into a museum, but probably ain't going to happen for Frank.
No.
And so every day these Zappa fans die and their stuff goes in the trash. Why is this important? Because Frank even said it doesn't matter. After I die, get out of the music business, doesn't matter. But
Right.
there's something about this idea of why, you're going to live on, because your students are going to remember what you learned from them. But
Well, it depends upon your definition of an acceptable amount of time.
yeah,
My experience has been that people tend to think in terms of about 200 or 300 years.
yeah,
They don't talk about 10,000 years from now. 10,000 years from now, everything behind me that you see, everything I've ever accumulated will be trash.
yeah,
It will have decomposed or be in the trash. I think a lot these days about every object is future trash.
yeah,
If it's not going to end up in a museum somewhere, it's going to be trash.
yeah,
People can kid themselves, but every bobblehead that's being purchased today will
yeah,
be future trash.
yeah.
And all of these CDs behind me, future trash.
Right. But I mean, have you literally designated a plan what to do, what your wife and kids are supposed to do, or it doesn't matter?
I've been cavalier about that, I suppose. I haven't come up with a plan. I don't think my kids would really want all this stuff. I don't know. I think if I were to die, my wife would find a student of mine or one of my younger friends, like a music hardcore, and just give it all away.
Yeah.
I guess that's a burden to place on her to assume that she.
It is, and then it's the issue we're doing, but it's again, you having this awareness, but it's also, even if you said to the university, will you take all this stuff and use it as a learning tool? It's hard because universities don't have the budget or
Right.
the space. Like,
Right.
I got lucky. All my interviews over the last 40 years are, well, most of them are on audio cassettes and are stored in an archive for University of Santa Barbara. Like,
Good.
you know, there's an earthquake or whatever.
Right.
But it is, the phenomenon is the question, why? What? So what? And like, your kids might have kids, and then they weren't able to meet Andy, and maybe this will enable them to see, oh, this is how Andy acted and talked a little.
You're exactly right. I think that you're exactly right there. That is the beauty of things. Like, even this interview that we're doing right now will live on well after I'm dead. I'm assuming on YouTube. That's funny you mention that, because I do think about this, because like, I look at old family photos, like from 100 years ago, of these people sitting on the farm, and they're, that's black and white, and they look very stern and still and stiff. I have no idea. I know their names, but I don't know how they acted.
Yeah.
But then future generations, if they have any desire anyway, will be able to come back and hear me speak, or have some sense of my sense of humor and stuff. So that is true. But again, I think that it's silly to think just in terms of a few centuries, that 50,000 years from now, nobody's going to give a shit about me. I don't even entertain that thought.
But I love that photograph, and I think it's your mother in the 10-minute documentary on you. There's a shot of this woman on a haste.
Yeah.
Is that your mom?
Yes.
That is an amazing shot. Yeah.
That's in Hoosier Farm shot. Yes.
Yeah, that's a huge. So anyways, Andy, in closing, what gives you the most optimism?
The most optimism? Progress. I mean, social progress.
Yeah.
Yes. I do think it's very slow, but I do think that society is progressing.
Yeah. Well, it's been fun. The first question I asked in our first interview is, what's the best thing for a human being? And Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. And the last question, what gives you the most optimism? I asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life, what gives you the most optimism? He said, other people.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's sure been fun spending this time with another person, especially you, Andy. What a pleasure. And I hope our conversation can continue on forever and ever, even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now.
If our paths ever cross, if we can see each other in person, I'll be able to find out if you smell purple.
Well, I want you to come back to LA sometimes, because didn't we go to the Watts Towers together?
Yeah, you took me to the. I'd never heard of them. You took me down there. I was blown away by that.
No, there's a lot of flowers in our neighborhood. I'll walk you around that smell purplish.
Well, you were very nice to me, and I'll just kind of say this in general, but just, you were smart enough to be welcoming and nice, and I think that is one of the nicer compliments I can give you.
Oh, that's great, Andy. And
I didn't say that well, but I think you know what I mean by that.
I take it as a compliment. It's inspiring, and I do want to have more salons and talk about Zappa with all our crew of great articulate Zappa fans. So
yes,
thanks again, Andy. It's really been fun, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.